Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bob's Bookshelf. I'm your host, Bob. Today, a whole bunch of old Graphis Annuals. Graphis or Graphis. You could probably start a fight in a bar if you wanted to discuss the proper way to discuss this, to pronounce this, depending on where you are. But anyway, Graphis. Graphis Annuals. Graphis is and was a publication about graphic design, started in Switzerland. It started with a magazine in 1944, and then they added the annual in 1952. This is the first one right here. The magazine and press was started by Walter Herdeg and Walter Amstutz, and then in 1952 they started the annual. The Graphis and the annuals are still published today. In 1986, Herdeg sold Graphis Press to Martin Pedersen, and he moved the operation to New York. Graphis had been headquartered in Zurich before, and Graphis, the magazine, or as it's called now, a journal, and the various annuals are published to this day. And I have to say, I'm always very pleased when some of my work gets published by Graphis. So the reason I thought it would be interesting to look at these much older annuals is because our sense of the history of graphic design is that the 50s was the ascendancy of the Swiss international style. And I thought, well, let's look at the record. Graphis was the premier European design annual back then. And so let's take a look and see what's in there. And of course, what you find is that, yes, there is some international style, Swiss, high modernist kind of work in here, but the vast majority of it is not. And what makes it especially interesting is that a lot of that work that is not the work we think of as being the work from the 50s is also really interesting and beautiful, but is more or less forgotten because all we remember now is Armin Hoffman and all of those guys. So anyway, I thought it would just be really interesting to go through a stack of these and look at some selected spreads and just see what's in here. All right, so on that note, let's pin and begin and have a water break first. Okay, so here we go. The first Graphis Annual, 52-53, designed by Walter Herdeg. Beautifully printed and designed. Notice this is not set in a sans serif typeface, set in an old style. List of all the designers. You can just come here straight away and see who's in. Interestingly, Andy Warhol is in here, only as Andrew. Those of you who know Warhol's work know that he was a very successful illustrator before he managed to make a career shift into being an artist. So anyway, here's the first section on posters. We're going to look at mainly the posters because I think that's the work we know from the 50s tends to be posters. Okay, so here we go. Let's just see what this work is like from this time period. Beautifully illustrated works. Not a lot reproduced in color. Keep in mind that reproducing work in color back then was extremely expensive. Okay. So we see everything is pretty much illustrated. Every once in a while, there's some kind of typographic thing. But yeah, this is not what we think of as the 50s. Maybe something like this piece here by Joseph Binder. Okay. So let's jump ahead. And interestingly, this here, number 148, is a piece by Armin Hoffman. All right. This is not the kind of work we think of when we think of Hoffman. But his early work, or earlier than the work that he's best known for, had a kind of handmade calligraphic quality. All right. And then here, this is Otto Eicher. I'm sorry, these here are by Otto Eicher, and he is best known for doing the graphics for the Munich Olympics. Now, where you see the presence of this kind of modernist sensibility more thoroughly is in magazine advertisements, especially magazines to the various trades. So there's these kinds of works here, Saul Bass, Herbert Bayer, right? There's lots of lovely things here, but it's still, you know, the work that is consumer oriented still tends to be very illustrative in its nature. Okay, here's book covers back here, Alvin Lustig, and then I think, if I remember correctly, what did I tag here? Oh, and Andy Warhol illustration here for this album cover. All right. So that's 1952. Hey, what the heck? Let's move on to 1953. Again, go to the posters. Okay. So again, we see mostly illustrative in nature. Okay. Here's a Joseph Mueller Brockman poster. I mean, what's interesting is that when these do finally appear, the designer of the publication, Walter Herdeg, tends to not make that big a fuss about them. They're almost never reproduced in color. The illustrative work is reproduced in color. They're not terribly large. But what is interesting is that when you see them in context with the other work, it does feel very fresh and different, right? And of course, that's one of the jobs designers have, to make whatever they're communicating look and feel fresh and different. Here's Leone. I really wish I could see more of these in color. Here's Otto Eicher again, here and here. Beautiful poster there. All right. So there you go. It's pretty much illustration. Back here is another Andy Warhol illustration. We're back in the booklets section now. All right. 5455. This is one of the few that I have that has the dust jacket still on it. Beautiful illustration. For a while, you could get these very inexpensively. I only paid $20 for this one. Many of the others, I only paid $10. Those days are over, but that's okay. So I think another lesson here for me is that the loss of big, comprehensive design annuals is significant for the history of our profession. I really don't know how in 20 or 50 years anyone's going to be able to get a sense of the kind of work that is being done now. You might be able to search a whole bunch of things, or maybe, you know, someone will have a Pinterest page, if that even exists anymore, of, you know, the coolest stuff from the 2010s or what have you. But having everything here in one place, curated in some kind of way, is pretty interesting and helpful. So yeah, more Otto Eicher here. Beautiful, beautiful poster here by Max Huber. I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is these posters were large. They were made to be seen by pedestrians. And so you can imagine, walking down the street and, and seeing this, right? It would have been really pretty delightful and great. Or this poster here. There's no shortage of racist imagery in these old books, so that's covered with Post-its. But again, this little furry yellow chick floating above an egg, or this advertisement here would be just a delight to see in person on the street. In a way that maybe this would not be so much. Or like a giant fish, that would be fun. Okay, so let's jump ahead in the magazine advertisements. Again, like I mentioned earlier, it was in magazine ads, especially for trade ads, that a lot of the more modernist kind of visual vocabulary appears. Gene Federico. Okay. So we can't go through the whole thing because I have a giant stack of these to get through. So let's move on to 1956. And we'll just start jumping straight to the more modernist pieces and look at what else is on the spread. So this is a delightful typographic illustration here. But I think this is especially interesting and beautiful, a poster by Saul Bass. I had never heard of this or seen this poster before. Really interesting and beautiful. And then this poster here by Joseph Binder. So we're starting to see the presence of more of this kind of work now. So Otto Eicher again. Let's jump forward. Then there's this whole series of General Dynamics posters by Eric Nitschke, who, if you were here for episode 1, designed there was a corporate history book that I showed in that episode for General Dynamics. These are the posters that he made for the same company. And then here is a Joseph Mueller Brockman poster. Okay. All right. Seven. So we have Armin Hoffman and Joseph Mueller Brockman side by side. Down here is another really interesting and beautiful poster by Yusaku Kamakura, a designer who I don't know. But one interesting thing about these annuals is that it featured a lot of work from Japan. And there are places where, it's like, who's leading this thing? It seems like in some cases, the Swiss International style was really a version of the kind of design that was being done in Japan at that time. So that's pretty fascinating to see as well. When these books arrived, people would look at them pretty hard, I'm sure. And there would be mutual influence happening. This is such a funny little thing here. The lemon sliced and then the bottom used as a base to suggest that this is a drink holder. Love this crocodile brushing his teeth, and we're not looking at that thing. Okay, beautiful poster from Japan by Hiroshiki Ochi. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing anyone's name correctly, but doing the best I can here. Okay. Okay, now I thought this was really fascinating. This is the same designer, Herbert Lupin. So here a more traditional sort of illustrative poster, and here a poster made just with type. The color palettes are similar, which is pretty interesting, but the way the design is handled is completely different. And what's even more interesting is that they're both for car companies. Wild. Okay. Uh, 58. So we should be into the throes of the high Swiss style by this point. And, you know, some things are coming up, like here, Joseph Mueller Brockman, Armin Hoffman. I don't know this designer, Werner Zierd, but this is really beautiful as well. This exquisitely drawn lettering here, similar to what Hoffman is doing there. Really lovely. So still mostly illustrated. Also not a ton of photography either. All that will change in about 10 years or so. Right. '59. Lovely illustrated poster here. Saul Bass, lovely. Really interesting and beautiful poster here. I don't know this designer, and it seems like they seem like they must be from Eastern Europe. I can't possibly pronounce this person's name correctly, but beautiful poster. Saul Bass for the San Francisco International Film Festival. This is interesting because this is the poster for the Olympics in Rome in 1960. And I'm going to jump ahead and show the poster from the 64 Tokyo Olympics, which still looks amazingly fresh and beautiful. And in fact, is what the Olympics from 2020/2021 in Tokyo was based on. So, you know, that's a really interesting and fascinating thing to see as well. Okay, let's jump ahead. Here's more of these General Dynamics posters by Eric Nitschke, and a whole slew of them here. Really interesting. Okay, in fact, why don't we just jump straight to wherever I put them. This is embarrassing. I thought I had those out. Oh, they're at the bottom of the pile. Of course. Let's see if I can find that. Here we go. Here's Tokyo. And I'm sorry, it wasn't 60, it was 64. All right. Amazing, beautiful poster. Still looks great today. Yusako Kamakura and Osamu Hayasuki. I'm sorry, gentlemen. Anyway, this poster is fantastic. And like I mentioned, the 2020 games was based on this. Okay, what else is in here since we've jumped this far? Okay. One. Beautiful. Here's this famous thing from Hoffman. Both of these are from Hoffman, but this is the one that is reproduced everywhere. More Andy Warhol. And then I thought this was interesting. Here's an ad in the back for the Universe. So Monotype trying to market Universe. Pretty interesting. Okay, sorry, let's. Okay, the School of Visual Arts poster from George Cherney. Terrific, memorable poster. Great color illustrations. I mean, again, just keep imagining that you're seeing these on the street, large. Beautiful poster here for Nikon from Japan. Same designer as the Tokyo Olympics poster. Beautiful. The other thing I think is useful for all of us as designers to look at older work is because, again, we have one sense of what the history is. Here's Hoffman, or is it? And Mueller Brockman. We have one sense of what the history is, and you know, we want to be inspired in all kinds of different ways. And so seeing lots of different kinds of work, it is easier to get inspired in that way than just having this kind of monolithic history to draw from. Okay, that was 1960. Here's 61, 62. We'll stop here because 61 is when I was born. So that seems old enough. 61, that's 60 years ago. Here's this famous poster by Mueller Brockman. Another similarly composed poster, equally beautiful, by Kurt Worth. I don't know Kurt Worth's work, but that's also a great, lovely poster. Beautiful, beautiful lettering here. More Eric Nitschke. Yeah, really lovely. Again, the same designer as the Tokyo Olympics poster, Yusaku Kamakura. Sorry, Mr. Kamakura, I'm messing your name up. Okay, so let's, what did I pick here in the back? Oh, and in the back, we have the title sequence for Psycho by Saul Bass. All right, so let's go back to our regular view. There we go. So, you know, I think it's useful and helpful to be looking at all kinds of work all the time because you never know what's going to hit you, what's going to make sense, what's going to reverberate in some way that you can't even imagine, what's going to make sense to you in a different kind of way in months or days or years. So anyway, Graphis Annuals, amazing. So with that, thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.